It's time to break barriers and build bridges. Welcome to the DW Global Media Forum 2025. In times of crises, conflicts and fake news, free and unbiased information is more important than ever, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to access. Let's exchange ideas and insights on how to strengthen journalism. Together, we see
the DW Global Media Forum 2025.
Hello and welcome for what essentially will be a fireside chat with colleagues about why a lot of crucial crises where people lose their lives, their livelihoods, don't make it into the run order, don't make it into the production list for the next reel, don't make it to the users and viewers in the world, and don't make it into the minds of people who could put pressure on leaders to change what's happening. Let's first take a look at what we'll be debating in just a few moments from now.
Some stories make headlines. Others disappear.
I've lost friends and friends and friends through police victimization.
Around the world, crises unfold and fade from view. The spotlight moves on. The suffering continues. Local journalists fight to bring light to forgotten places. Innovative storytelling pushes boundaries to keep the truth alive. Can follow-ups break through the noise? Can local voices reach global ears? Breaking barriers, building bridges. Together, we see. How do we keep audiences from looking away? Let's dive into the discussion. Cutting through the noise. Forgotten crises in the news cycle.
So it takes the Global Media Forum to be able to have a debate and a talk with journalists from Afghanistan, from Sudan, from Belarus, to find out what's happening. And I'm very pleased to have a round of distinguished colleagues here. The acting head of the Belarus Press Club in exile is with us today. She had to leave the country, is now working from Warsaw and trying to coordinate efforts to keep the press as free and as outspoken as possible. Natalia Belikova, please come and join us. The editor-in-chief of Amo TV, a digital news platform in Afghanistan that he founded himself, is with us here today. He provides independent reporting in Farsi and Pashto. Sami MiCT, so great to have you with us today. Now, she's one of India's most recognized broadcast journalists and the founder-editor of Mojo Story, a digital-first multimedia platform. She's reported from some of the world's most volatile regions, Kashmir, Iraq, Israel. She's seen it all. She's won more than 50 awards. Bukadut, please come and join us on stage. So great to have you with us today. And I can see the screen moving. Oh, great, fantastic. Rafa, Renas, can you hear us?
Hello, everyone. Yes.
Great. She's an award-winning Sudanese regional journalist and a human rights advocate focusing on the Middle East and Africa. She's also, importantly, a network builder in the region and beyond in her role as community manager for East Africa for the Media Incorporation and Transition Network. So great that the line is holding. Rafa, Renas, this is your applause. But in news fashion, I want to start where the news is, because we've had a development on Afghanistan, Sami, and that's why I want to speak to you first about it. Overnight, the General Assembly of the United Nations passed a resolution calling for action on the role of women, particularly in Afghanistan, Interestingly, the United States voted against that because they reject anything that could involve a financial commitment to assist. Yeah, you're already shaking your heads. So this is an overnight event that puts Afghanistan back in the headlines. What would you like to see in those headlines today?
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here. What I want to see Afghanistan to be as a headline across the world is when freedom is back in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is an exception to the humanity now when it comes to basic human rights and freedoms. Afghanistan is the only country in the world where girls above age 12 are not allowed to continue their education. It's the only country in the world where women are not allowed to go to university level education. It's the only country in the world where women have to conceal and cover their faces when they appear on TV. And only country in the world where men and women are not allowed to talk to each other on the screen, on TVs. It's just about, if you look into Afghanistan's situation from a human rights and women's rights perspective, you will see that. Yes, there was this UN General Assembly resolution in Afghanistan. We see that not every country agrees with that. And we do not see a significant voice from within Afghanistan or from our diaspora community, which is unfortunately now 25% of the population, in that resolution. It is based on the, preferences of the international community, not our people. That's the unfortunate side of it. The fortunate side of it is, of course, still the world is thinking about Afghanistan and talking about Afghanistan.
And I want to get to an overarching point that every crisis is different, every conflict is different, every society is different. But I want us to really focus on what the common denominators are. And I think the case of Afghanistan, particularly with there having been some movement on that story, to use the jargon, highlights that we are in an attention economy that we need to hack, that we need to get through. And Rafa, Renas, I want to take that straight to you because you are a networker. What is your formula to break through and hack that attention economy?
Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to join you today, virtually, of course. But I want to start with something simple but hard. We have to create our own platforms, community, and strategies to be seen and heard. And Sudan is going through one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world right now. But because it's not trending, because it's not geopolitically priority, it disappeared from the headlines. The war didn't stop, it just became more invisible. As a Sudanese journalist, artist, and activist, we are consistently trying to keep the world eyes on a crisis that the world has turned away from. And to do that, we have to get creative. I created the Aflam Sudan Film Festival as a way to keep Sudan visible through, cinema, art, and human stories. We screened films in Kenya, Rwanda, and in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. We hopefully beyond that. But even with all of that efforts, we are still trying to cut through the noise. And I think it's exhausting. We shouldn't have to do it alone. But yeah, we try to hack the system.
And I want to take that to you, Barka, because you've been in many conflict regions. You've experienced many different societies, but in the current economy of attention, what is the common factor when you are in a conflict, or even in India, which has seen so many elections, you're trying to break through what is a sense of saturation level on certain stories.
Thank you, and thank you to DW for having me here. This is such an important forum. Every year, for the last 3 years, we've seen some of the things we should be talking about and don't. That said, let me give you a brief window into the news cycle in India over the last 2 months. We had a terror attack, it was followed by war, and it was followed by an air crash. All 3 of these headline stories happened back to back with gigantic ramifications. They did not have a problem getting into the headlines, but even these cataclysmic events had a problem staying in the headlines. That is how quickly our attention spans are moving. This is not about India. This is not about Afghanistan. This is not about Belarus. It's not about Germany. It's about our profession. It's about consumption patterns changing. It's about what we're competing with, the challenges of technology, which is both democratizing as well as creating an information glut in which nothing holds and nothing stays. It's about, for some people, challenges from the state, for others, challenges from revenue, and then it's about challenges from your audience. You know, how are you going to compete with, I don't know, vloggers and influencers in an increasingly competitive market? Let me just share one little story with all of you. About 4.5 years ago, as the pandemic was hitting the world, one of those rare universal stories, I started my own platform, moving from television to digital video. And I went to a village an hour away from our national capital in Delhi. The village is on one of those glitzy, just off one of those glitzy expressways that are a big part of India's infrastructure achievements, and I'm not taking away from that achievement, it's a very important achievement. But you hop off that shiny expressway, and I reached a village where at that time, if you remember, we didn't fully understand that COVID and the virus was airborne. So in the initial days, everybody was telling everybody, keep washing your hands. At least in India, we had this, keep your hands clean, keep washing your hands. So I go to this little village, and it's surrounded by factories, and it's a big part of India's industrialization story. And I say to everybody, why aren't you washing your hands? You should be washing your hands, as I'm talking to them. And they take me to the public supply line of the tap water there, and the water is yellow. I did a story on it called The Village with the Yellow Water. The water is yellow. And I say, well, why is the water yellow? And they say, because the chemical sort of ingredients of the surrounding factories have seeped into the underground water supply. And they've been trying to get this story onto the national news, including myself, for the last many years, but nobody cared and nobody paid attention. And when they washed their hands with that yellow water, their bodies break into rashes. So here they were, in the middle of COVID, with everybody telling them, wash your hands, and they couldn't actually wash their hands because the water supply was basically chemically contaminated. I share this story because in any other moment other than COVID, it would not have been glamorous enough, hard-hitting enough to make it to a lead story of any of our mainstream newsrooms, right? And we have to ask ourselves in this conversation, and I'll stop here and come in later with some ideas, why? Why? Can we blame technology? Can we blame the market? Can we blame Gen Z? Or do we also have to turn a gaze inwards and ask ourselves, are we too set in our ways? Have we not learned better storytelling skills? We have only 2 choices. We can stop being journalists, or we can do a better job of telling stories. We have to choose which one it is.
Thanks for that point. And many of us who work in newsrooms, we know how these debates go. So I'd like to take that to you, Natalia. Belarus used to be a story in itself. It's just seen as its most prominent opposition leader released, often, mostly actually now reported on in the context of the Ukraine war. How do you try and, I mean, if you can't beat this tide, I guess, but how do you try and surf it?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me here. I would like to bring another dimension and another perspective, because for us the attention span has two spheres or 2 different worlds. One is how independent media that are working from exile are reaching the audiences inside Belarus and have their attention. And the other question is, how do we, as exiled media community, reach out to international audiences and tell our story? So going to the first dimension, I think here the Belarusian independent exiled media are a success story, because 5 years after the protest, we're still holding on to our audiences, and audiences still trust us and read us and consume us. And that's despite all the repressions that are still ongoing. Many of you probably don't know, but journalists are still arrested almost every day. You hear there and often that some political prisoners are being released, but new ones are taking hostages. And also independent media are toxic for people to consume it. They can go to prison, they can be fined for reading just normal news that you are all used to. You know, you're switching your TV, you're just fed up with this. In Belarus, people are actually risking their freedoms to read independent media. And that dimension is actually, the independent media have 40% of the audience still consumes that, and we think this is a huge achievement. The hardest story is how to tell our story to the rest of the world. And here is a huge problem, because Belarus is not on the radars. It's only considered as a complicity in crime with Russia. And this image has already stuck, and it's putting together the people of Belarus and the authorities in one pot, which is not fair, because 90% of Belarusians do not support the war, and it's not for a reason that Belarusians are not actively participating in the war with their own troops. So I think here there is a lot more to explore also, and I call to our international partners to come and ask. You will find so many interesting stories how all this happens, and many of them would be relevant to you, because in Belarus, people live in scarce information, and you're dying from too much information. So I think things may change, and our experience may be also useful for some of you.
Yeah, too much information, how much of it is actually true, and then the question, how much is relevant? That's what we are grappling with all day, and we've had some really great discussions here on that. I want to get you in the audience to ask what you've always wanted to ask, which is more coverage on the crises that you feel like you're not getting enough information about. So maybe we can just put up that Slido question, so you can basically just place or let us know which crises you are thinking in the back of your mind. Because for me, it's almost as a reporter, I mainly report on German politics, but of course German foreign policy. Almost a bad conscience that there are so many millions of people out there whose suffering isn't documented. And when I trained to become a journalist, and I will not disclose how long ago that is, I was told the news is where the journalists are. And I'll take that question really to all of you, because how has that sentence changed for you, Rafa, certainly? Is the news really where the journalists are, or is the new kind of usage, is social media completely changing the game there? I know it's a rhetorical question, but I'm still curious what your specific answer is.
Sorry, can you just repeat it?
Yes, we can hear you. Could you hear the question?
I think she's asking.
Oh, yes. Let me just repeat the question. Basically, I'm asking how you are seeing the equation changed for journalists through social media, particularly when it comes to reporting crises and cutting through the noise. That's what the title of this panel was really alluding to, cutting through that noise of, as Natalia put it, of dying of too much information, but not being able to get the relevance of the suffering of so many people to the user.
So yeah, social media helps. It's allowed the Sudanese journalists to, speak directly to the world, and the independent media, that was their way to share and update. And other, like the activists and the group, like Emergency Response Room, they update from the front line inside Sudan and giving the information. But it doesn't always help because we have the two parties of war, they're using like Facebook and TikTok to fill their propaganda and always share the misinformation, sharing their propaganda and their side of the story. So for us, social media was the only way for independent media to continue working and to tell what's really going on, but there is a lot of misinformation in there. So it's always like the two sides of it.
Parker, I see you nodding, so I'd be curious to have your response on that as well.
I mean, I think we have to understand that we live in a very contradictory age where we call it social media. I don't think it's social media anymore. I think it's new technology, which is not even new anymore. I mean, it's, you know, whether it's WhatsApp channels or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. In India, TikTok is banned because of China, but TikTok elsewhere. These are now very mainstreamed platforms, and Reuters Institute's most recent survey tells you that globally, a majority of our audience is consuming our content on either YouTube or WhatsApp, right? So we have to acknowledge that this is not social media anymore in the way that you would once put up a post about your holiday to, I don't know, Venice on Facebook. It is so not that. It is now very mainstream. And here is the challenge we are confronted with. The upside is that this is democratized sort of content so that today me or we can run our own platforms because the barriers to entry are much less expensive than they used to be. You don't need giant satellite vans with, you know, dishes and all the rest of it. Technology has made it possible to stream live from almost anywhere in the world. And that's great. The downside is that because it's now, everybody thinks that they are journalists. Mm-hmm. This is not our exclusive preserve or prerogative anymore. You have as she mentioned, a certain degree of disinformation because there's very little gatekeeping. But B, you have a polarized media environment like never before. And journalists are under enormous pressure to take sides. This is not the journalism that we were, these were not the tenets that we were shaped by. We were told to follow the facts. But today, to get clicks, to get views, there's enormous pressure from the left or the right of your countries to take a side, because that's the nature of the internet loves bias, right? So how do you create an authentic voice for yourself that doesn't gravitate to either sides, I think is something we should talk about. And finally, you said it used to be that news was where journalists were. And I think we have to have a mea culpa moment as journalists, that there is a lot of navel-gazing, a lot of journalism that's done for other journalists. And for me, this is a personal discovery in terms of how reporting COVID for 2 years, traveling across India, really changed me as a journalist. And I think news should not be where the journalists are. News should be where the fewest journalists are. News should be where the people are.
I mean, everybody would agree to it. It's just that the dynamics.
I understand. I understand, but I think we've all lived a lot because we're these type A personalities who are competing, and that's great. Mm-hmm. I'm all for ambition and good, healthy competition. But a lot of times we're doing content to impress our peers. We got it first. We scooped that. We got that interview first. And it's so far removed from where and what people in our audiences actually care about.
And to feed algorithms, and there was a great debate yesterday, Correct. Which I recommend just checking that out online again, about the impact that AI is having actually on us to even be able to have, there it is, to have a go at doing what is our job, which is reporting the facts. So here's the question. Please scan the Slido here and let us know, because I want us to have a dive into which conflicts are deliberately on the backs of your mind that you feel you really should have checked in with and you somehow didn't. And I like what you just described, but again, I'd like to take this to Afghanistan and then to Belarus, really, those two different societies which are a lot more locked in than India, for instance. I mean, India is an incredibly vibrant media market, but how much do the power dynamics of traditional media actually still impact for instance, Afghanistan?
Yeah, I think a few years ago we were talking about the global village. That's true. Internet has made the global village. But at the same time, it is, I think, wrong of us to think that priorities of people everywhere are the same, or people are getting news on the same platforms everywhere. In our case in Afghanistan, that's not true, at least. Internet is very expensive. Access to internet is not everywhere. So therefore, the traditional media, TV and radio, are the first and foremost sources of news and information still for Afghanistan. That's why we established this AMU TV, which through satellite, we can penetrate inside Afghanistan and go to every village and keep the flow of information for people. That's one thing. The second thing about this very interesting question, which crisis would you like to see more continuous reporting on? Unfortunately, we are in an era where we are competing who can have more crises. Mm-hmm. So you have to have crisis to grab attention internationally. Otherwise, for example, the plane crashed in India. The day after that, we had the war between Israel and Iran. So nobody globally was, unfortunately, talking about those lives lost in India. Or the Gaza war, or so many other crises, including Sudan and other places. Afghanistan has been forgotten because it looks like a very domestic crisis. Internationally, you don't see Afghanistan making any headlines anymore, because if people are suffering, how much of that suffering is going to affect other people globally? If it's not going to affect other people, impact other people's lives globally, you're not important. That's the situation, unfortunately. Coming back to the digital age, and yes, we see that more people have access to internet compared to the past in Afghanistan as well. But in Afghanistan case, if you want to be a vlogger or a YouTuber, you have to go to the Taliban government and get permission for that. Without permission from the Taliban, you are not allowed to have a YouTube channel. If you criticize the Taliban on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, the second day, their intelligence will come and arrest you and torture you. And nobody is going to listen, nobody is going to care about that, because it's not a crisis which makes international impact.
Without revealing your sources, what are your sources of information? Where do you even get reliable information from?
The good side of internet is, and digital world, is that we still have a lot of sources inside the country. We have freelancers in every single province of 34 provinces of Afghanistan, where people send us on daily basis documents, videos, footage about what's happening. When I was walking from the hotel to the conference this morning, one person from Badakhshan sent me some information about one of his relatives who was arrested by the Taliban because he used to work for the ex-government of Afghanistan. But sources protection is very, very important for us, which is a big challenge. Unfortunately, Taliban have restricted media environment in the country to a level that freedom of expression is completely diminished in Afghanistan. We used to have one of the freest environments in the region, maybe with the exception of India in some cases. But now we are compared to North Korea, unfortunately. That's the situation. Taliban have to approve every single person who appears on media. The analysts should have a card, an ID card by the Taliban, issued by the Taliban, if they want to appear on TV. We are I think we have lost our most valuable achievement in the past 20 years, which was freedom of expression, unfortunately.
And Natalia, I just want to also ask you a two-way question about Belarus, because you have to work in exile. We're just seeing these crises or potential conflicts. Myanmar, there was crackdown in Turkey. Climate was a big issue. South Sudan, horrendous figures of humanitarian suffering there. East Africa, Rwanda here. And let's just look through, repression in Serbia, Georgia, Belarus. Do these crises actually feature in Belarus? Does information get there for people of Belarus to know what global crisis context they actually live in? And how do you get information out? So a two-way question.
This is a very good question. To be honest, because we are talking about relevance of media, right? Mm-hmm. So exiled Belarusian media report what is relevant for people inside Belarus. So most of them will not be international stories because country has been locked in by the international community. Planes are not flying. The government has blocked access to internet. So basically people live in super isolation. It's not as isolated as in Afghanistan or North Korea because internet penetration is extremely high in Belarus. It's almost 100%, it's 99-something%. And also we have the access to all the platforms like TikTok and YouTube. However, the government 100% controls TV, radio and print, all the legacy media sources. So all the other information is on the internet and TikTok and YouTube. And we see that TikTok and YouTube are right now on basically the same level of competition with TV. And I'm sure that, if it goes on like this, in a couple of years, it will bypass it. So the other side, the propaganda, is also exploiting different options how to get digital, and they're investing so much money into digital as well and producing digital content. But on the other hand, when we're talking about the attention span and the crisis, people mostly focus on their region. They would know about the war in Ukraine, they would know, who is right and who is wrong, but they would not go beyond that. And this is also a problem of a very closed society when your information is scarce and you have to choose really carefully where you're risking your freedom, what types of content you're consuming, what can get you, in danger.
Rafa, I want to take this to you as well. I know that you are a network builder, and I would like to know what you feel would be a good step to empower regional journalists who, as we heard, go where the people are, particularly on those conflicts that are underreported.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, to empower the local journalists, we need to invest in so many things, more than just visibility. We need protection. In the context of Sudan, journalists are working under extreme threats, harassment, detention, and even target violence from both sides of war, RSF and SAF. For me, empowering means to make sure they can report safely and independently. And it's like empowering means trusting the local journalists to lead and protect them so they can survive while doing it.
And I just want to do a quick run through of the crises that really haven't appeared in the news much. Sudan does top the list with 24 people in need, 14 million displaced, and mass atrocities. These are UN figures. Yemen, more than 20 people in need. That's 80% of the population. When have we last heard about Yemen? Probably in the context of Yemenis rebels firing at Israel. Somalia, 6 million in need, 3.8 displaced. There's drought. That's according to Concern Worldwide. South Sudan, 13.6 million people in need, 4.3 million displaced. Ethiopia, 10 million in need. Haiti, 6 million in need. Burkina Faso, also almost 6 million in need, according to a CARE report. And with that's the rundown of what we don't get in the news unless we really make an effort of searching for it. And I just want to give you, everybody here in the room, fellow journalists, the opportunity to ask a question to this panel before I have to let them go, which I really don't want to. But is there anybody who would like to ask a specific question on these regions or the greater context? Then please speak up now. I can't see any hand. Oh, there we go. Yes.
My name's Carrie Oderman, and one of the things that I've always wondered about is providing the extra context for people that are unfamiliar with conflicts. And how problematic is this for you to have to retell the story over and over again to remind people of what's happening? We see this with President Zelensky in Ukraine on a regular basis. I'm sure this happens in Belarus and Afghanistan and India, of course. Do you have a standard answer that you then create and give? And how does this affect you even personally?
Is there anyone specific you want to address that to? Or just Barker, can I just throw that to you?
I mean, I think from the age of newspaper writing to digital publishing, that's important, right? So you have your lead, what is new about the story that pulls the audience in, and the second graph, imagine the second graph converting into the second spoken sentence is always the context. And yes, unfortunately, as mundane as it may sometimes feel for those of us who've been following one beat for like 30 years, you have to repeat that context because there is an entire generation or a new audience that you're hoping to get who doesn't know anything and who may be looking at that for the very first time. I was just thinking, if I may, with your permission, end on a note of hope, because I think we've had a lot of, this is the problem, this is what's going wrong, this is what we're up against. Yes, but what should we take away from this? And I think there is unlearning and learning. And unlearning is tougher because it involves letting go of a certain way that you knew how to tell a story. I think we can hold on to our ethics, our core values. But I'll give you my example. I came really late to Instagram as a platform, because in my mind, I was a serious journalist, and I was not going to enter this world of reels where everybody was just taking sort of filtered, pouty fashion videos. This is how I thought of it. And then I was like, that's really ridiculous of me, because A, I'm patronizing my audience, B, I'm letting go of an entire segment of audience. I don't have to change into something I'm not. Young people in particular value authenticity. Take yourself as you are, but embrace every platform. And I do think that there's an opportunity here if we were just willing to kind of get off our high horses, our old ways of doing things. Remember the passion that brought us here. Remember the love for telling a story that brought us here. Never give up as reporters the privilege and the opportunity to go into the field. That distinguishes you from an influencer, from a vlogger, because you're actually out there. But let's find ways to communicate better. It's a communication challenge, and I think we should see it as that and just tell better stories.
Thank you for that inspirational note. And that brings us almost to the end of the time we have today for this, but not for the end of the discussion. And I'd just like to finish by asking each of you, and it's kind of the magic wand question. I'm going to start with you, Rafa. If there's one obstacle that you could just remove magically, what would it be? That everybody gets to unlearn, let go of something. Here, Rafa, please.
I think I would say treating the local journalist as a source, not as a fully storyteller or, editorial voices, because in the context of Sudan, the local journalists are treated as a source only.
Great, Barka.
An inbuilt, reliable fact checker. That would be my magic wand, because it really doesn't matter what platform you're on, what mechanism you're using. We're all falling back on Google searches. In my team, in my company, you're not allowed to use Wikipedia as a source because there's just so much incorrect stuff that can also be there as quick as it is. So AI, we didn't talk about AI, we briefly touched upon it, but I hope the good side of AI will actually deliver to us a very quick fact checker, which would take us to some verified, respectable sources digitally, so that we knew that when we're giving that context that was mentioned, you know, the first time Afghanistan was assaulted by an outside country was in the year dot. We're giving it correctly because somebody's going to quote our story onwards. And so that would be my hope for a magic wand.
We could do every panel on AI. It's such a powerful tool, but I'm with you on that. Yeah. Sami.
It's very difficult, but I think a few years ago, 4 years ago, we had underground insurgency and terrorism in Afghanistan. Now we have underground journalism. So that's how the landscape has changed for us. Now our journalists, for their own safety and for their families, they have to be underground and, you know, safe somewhere. For me, number one thing still is safety of my colleagues and my sources inside the country. And the second thing is how to survive when you're not inside your country, when you're not inside your you know, market, financially, and also from an information point of view. How to survive, that's the biggest question. And unfortunately, I see the global attention shifting towards other things and not giving journalism, professional journalism, as Burka mentioned, everybody has become a journalist, and we welcome that, but let's become professional journalists, everyone. So not everyone, not every country, especially Europe, I think there are a lot of expectations from European countries nowadays when it comes to basic human rights and women's rights values, but I don't see that enough attention and enough sources are given to the people and to the outlets who are fighting for these causes.
Resources, yeah. Natalia, magic wand. What obstacle can you remove?
Magic wand, because I was talking about two dimensions. I will also have two magic wands for two dimensions. For one dimension, that inside Belarus, I would love to see all media in Belarus that are now in exile cleared of the designation of terrorists and extremists. This really creates this image of Belarus as a terrorist state, which is actually getting into pop culture. You know, there were already soap operas, series on TV depicting Belarus as a terrorist state for training some mercenaries and terrorists, which is not true. This is for Belarus, and for the world. I think we all need a magic wand to make journalism matter again, to prop up professional treatment of information, to understand that information is not just a commodity that you can use whichever way you want. You really need a professional treatment of information, and that needs to be a great filter for the future.
You went for the big ask, absolutely, yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, all four of you, for this fantastic conversation, which I'm sure we will continue here, and please have these conversations here on the sidelines of the event. Thanks so much. I'll let you take your seats again. So thanks to our distinguished panel. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. And now I'd like to ask Javier Arguedas on stage, my colleague. Please, you can all take your seats again. Thanks so much. Javier, you will be having a conversation in a moment about the economic models of newsrooms and how to make them sustainable. And I understand they have to do a bit of reconstruction here.
We can move this way, exactly. I'm assuming that just like me, you've had many conversations along the Global Media Forum, and it always becomes clear that we have to reinvent ourselves as journalists, as media institutions. No matter what panel you're joining, you're hearing that because of the transformations that are requiring it. And that, of course, also applies on how we make our money. Not only in some cases with ambitions of becoming an empire, but sometimes also simply to survive. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
And are you going to be looking at the role of the big networks again? Is that, the question of resources? And I think it's really interesting that when talking about getting more reporting on forgotten conflicts, it requires resources. Where are they going to come from? You sell adverts, you are on social media.
Or you have public funding, which
or
is
you
also
have public funding, which is severely under pressure.
Correct. That is one of the big questions and of the big challenges. How are you going to rethink your revenue models? How can you, if you have power, use it to use your resources more efficiently amongst these challenges? And if you do not, what alternatives do you have? Of course, the pressure is big, and there's pressure from big companies, but we're going to hear from brilliant minds to address those.
Okay, I look forward to that, and I'll
Thank
leave
you very
to
much,
Thank
and
you.
congratulations on your panel. All right. I will ask for some silence in the room so we can listen closely and carefully to what we are going to hear from our guests in our next panel. As stated, the current situation requires us to rethink and requires us to change.